Hi, and welcome to the 9th webinar in the Housing First in Practice series. The title of this session is Ending Homelessness is Not a Utopia. In this webinar, you will hear a conversation between two Housing First experts who will explore 5 key topics. Julia Wygnańska, president of the Housing First Poland Foundation, speaks with Juha Kahila, head of international affairs at Y Foundation, who also played a vital role in the establishment and development of Housing First Poland. Let's get started. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
We are all observing the Finland's case. Since 2008, Finland has successfully reduced homelessness by implementing the paradigm of the right to housing. This paradigm became internationally known under the name Housing First, as mainstreamed by Sam Tsemberis, the founder of the American NGO Pathways to Housing and international advocate for Housing First. So that's the picture what Finland did. The ending of homelessness in Finland, which you can see on the slides, is unprecedented because it is real on 2 levels, individual and systemic. Individual people who were experiencing homelessness are not experiencing it anymore. And the national policy, which was previously shelter-based, is now housing-based. My understanding is that every person who is threatened or already experiences homelessness in Finland can rationally expect to receive the offer of support, which includes some form of housing, not shelter, and support adequate to his or her needs. And it becomes the person's decision to use it. So I may say, that's my understanding, that the choice is real. To compare the choices, using the Polish example, I took the freedom to summarize some basic statistics about homelessness and housing in Poland. You can see that the counted population of people experiencing homelessness is about 31,000, of which 21,000 are people who are experiencing this crisis longer than 2 years, which by the Finnish definition would definitely be a long-term homelessness. And probably majority of that group are customers who can be helped by Housing First programs or Housing First value-based programs. At the same time, looking at the currently working Housing First programs in Poland, there are about 183 people who can actually use this support. So the Finnish result is the one that the whole world is looking up to. And I am extremely grateful for Juha's readiness to share the Finnish way with the audience of the Housing First Poland Foundation webinar. And moving quickly to the first questions before answering, which I hope Juha will introduce himself in his own words. I wanted to start with the question to you, Juha. What do you feel is the homelessness? What is the core of homelessness?
Well, thank you, Julia, and thank you, Maya, for inviting me into this really exciting webinar, and congratulations. I think the past 5 years you have really done a great job in the Polish context, and the work shall continue, of course. And yeah, my name is Juha Kahila, and as Julia said, I'm the head of the international affairs at the Y Foundation. And then I have been working in the field of homelessness and housing for the past 16 years or so. So I have been a support worker myself for many years, then developing the Housing First services, especially for young people. And then also I was leading one of the NGOs in the field of Housing First and homelessness in Finland for many years. And then 2018, I landed at the Y Foundation, coordinating the National Housing First Development Network, and did that a little bit, and then leading the network as well. So that's my background, so 16 years already, and you can see that my hair is getting grayer every year. And then I think that comes with the job, I guess. And then, yeah, thank you, Julia, for the kind words regarding the work we have done in Finland. And of course, later on in this good discussion, we will go into the challenges that we are facing at the moment. But for the first question, what is homelessness? I think it's the extreme form of social exclusion on an individual level and on a society level as well. And
Bye, buddy. Love you.
and for someone
Love you.
someone experiencing homelessness, of course, it's a traumatized experience. There is no safety. All you can think about is where you're gonna lay your head the next night. Is there a place in a shelter, temporary accommodation, not even talking about the home, where you're gonna find your next hot meal, when you're gonna get a chance to get in the shower, all these kind of things. And then the first picture there, I was in Budapest 2 years ago, and then the picture, the black and white picture, it's from a shelter in Budapest. And the older man, he was almost 90 years old, facing the even grayer hair than me. He had stayed in that shelter for over 5 years. He shared a room with 5 other people, no privacy, nothing, more or less. And then we had a good discussion, and I asked what would be heaven for him in reality, if he could choose. And the answer was quite simple. A home would be my heaven, but then he had, but I have a gut feeling that the real heaven will come before I get a home of my own. So I think that's a crucial statement that we need to address. And homelessness is a choice. And it's not choice of the people who are homeless. They are just experiencing it. But we choose it with our policies, with our decisions, with our politics. And I have made the picture homelessness is a choice because in Finland and at the Y Foundation, we have quite many visitors a year. Last year, I think it was something around 150, and this year it has been already 200 or so. Many politicians, decision makers, and so on. And then usually they have the question that what about those people who choose to be homeless? And I start to think about that is it really so that the biggest issue is that people choose to be homeless? And like I said, I have been doing support work for many years, met hundreds of former homeless people, and then no one choose to be homeless. And then the other story, I was a year ago in San Francisco, where there are thousands of people on the streets, and the public opinion is that they choose to be there because of drugs and mental health challenges. And I spoke quite many of those people during my trip there and asked if they want to share how they end up on a situation that they are on the streets. And all the people had more or less similar experience. They had worked previously in the city center, in the big buildings, which are now empty, as maintenance workers, cleaners, in a cafeteria, or so on and so on. And since the big companies move away from the city center, people now work from homes. They were not needed anymore, so they got fired. And because the social safety net in US is horrible, they end up on the streets within a month. Many of the people I spoke to, it's true that they had mental health challenges. Many of them used drugs, but they had a good question. Try to stay on the streets for 6 months or more and see how you feel after that. Would you have your mental health in a good condition? And how would you treat that condition? So then comes the drugs and alcohol and so on. So people, they are not choosing to be there. They are there because of the policies we have made. And then the other thing is that I think it's somehow interesting that we even need to ask this question, that people choose to be homeless. And many of the people who I've met and asked this question, they have never met any homeless people. They have never asked any questions, not any kind of communication with these people, but still they have this idea in their head that someone choose to be on the streets without a safe place of their own, not knowing where to lay your head in the evening. So that's why I think it's really important that we see the issue of homelessness as an individual issue. Of course, it's traumatized experience, like I said, but then we also need to see it as a systemic failure. And in my opinion, if we can say, or if we are saying that we are living in a civil society, we shouldn't have homeless people on the streets or in the shelters. And then so I think there are many things we should do better in the future to make sure that the people would have a safe place to call home in the future.
I really like your answer because you're actually showing us that the agency for ending homelessness is a choice, but it's not people who experience it choice, but it's our choice.
Mm.
So it makes me interesting what we can do. For now, I don't mean us as professionals. I mean us as inhabitants, family members, leaders of local communities, just regular inhabitants. What can we do in our communities, just around us, to end homelessness?
That is a good question, and I put the quote there that housing first means that housing is the cornerstone that enables a homeless person to solve other problems. And that was said by the Jan Vapaavuori, the housing minister back in the days in Finland, who started the whole housing first scheme here. And then he's from a national coalition party, which leans on the right side of the political spectrum. So finance-wise, they are on the right side. But yeah, what can member of communities and inhabitants do? I think there are quite many things. A recent experience from Finland is that since the number of homeless people is growing a little bit here as well, unfortunately, there is a big shopping center near our offices in Pasila, near the city center of Helsinki, and it has become this kind of hub for homeless people, where some of the homeless people spend their nights, and in most cases, the shopping centers or malls, what they do is that they tried everything in their power to get people off their premises and make sure that no one sleeps under their roof. But I was really surprised and happy that in Helsinki, the Tripla shopping center, they had this other kind of perspective how they want to handle the situation. So they call all the different homeless NGOs around the Helsinki city and also the Helsinki city officials who work with homeless people, and they created a network, and that how we can help these people to find the right place for them. And I think that really shows that there is still sympathy left in people, even though we're talking about big money shopping centers, that there are good people working in these premises and they want to do the right thing. So I was really happy, and I think that's a great example what we can do as inhabitants as well, even though the network is for the professionals, but the shopping center is far from being professionals. They could just throw people out, but they chose to do the right thing in my experience. So I think that's something that.
If I may intervene, I just spoke to a director of a local library in Rybnik, which is a town in southern Poland, in Silesia. And he was just talking to me because he was asked by the managers of the shopping gallery in Rybnik, who asked him to come over for a talk to the special room, which was not a shop, it was a room dedicated by the managers to young people who presumably were homeless or in some kind of crisis and who were coming over to the gallery. And the first idea of the managers was to remove them by security guards, but after some thinking, they dedicated a special space for them so that they can be there, feel it to be their place, and they can even meet a director of a local library to ask him questions. So I would consider that more or less a like solution.
Yeah, exactly. And in the shopping center right now, the NGOs and the city of Helsinki, the outreach teams, now they are more closely in the shopping center, for example. And now the shopping center is looking opportunities if they could offer some kind of social spaces for people to do one-on-one discussions there and these kind of things. So that's really good, and I like what you just shared from the library experience. So there are good things happening. And then if we go purely to an individual level, what can someone as an inhabitant of a city do? Well, I think one of the things is that you can advocate your local politicians, you can advocate the government, of course, and to have better policies and demand more housing and support for the people. Because at the end of the day, when we take care of the most vulnerable people in our societies, which usually are homeless people, we create better cities and better surroundings for everyone living in the cities. So I think that's one thing that individuals can do. And then what I learned here in Finland is that quite many people at the moment, when the numbers are going up a little bit, they're volunteering to work for NGOs. I think that's something you can do if you want and if you have the possibility. And I really like that. And then so there are a new wave of people who have entered volunteering NGOs to do the work, and of course they get to know the issue of homelessness more deeper way, and they can share their stories to the neighbors and so on to the communities. So that's something you can do as well. And then one of the things that has happened here as well is that people are now donating money to NGOs working especially with the people who are on the streets or in shelters. So that's a great thing. And then the current government have got some of the funding from the NGOs, so they NGOs are really happy that now there are some public people who have also made some donations to help them continue the good work they are doing. And then I think outside from the homeless sector, I think schools have an important role, or could have important role as well, in a way that schools catch up most of the young people one way or another. So I think this kind of simple question, what is your housing situation, could be a good way to encounter the issue as well. And I think it would be also a good way to do prevention work in a way. So if you find out that someone is not having a stable housing conditions, you could start working with those individuals immediately, and then at the best case scenarios prevent them ending into homelessness at some point in their lives. So I think schools could have a big role in this as well, with this simple question, what is your housing situation, and work from there on. And I think that's something that I would like to see more happening here in Finland as well, and but also in other countries, because I think it's a simple question, but the answer can give you so much. And then, like I said, the best case scenarios, it can help that someone doesn't end up on the streets in the first place in their life. And then I would like to promote this yes in my backyard thinking, because we all know the NIMBY, not in my backyard, but how about we change that into yes in my backyard? So whenever there's a new affordable housing projects or housing first unit projects coming in the city, how about promoting them that yes in my backyard, we want to have those kind of solutions in our in our backyards and in our communities and so on. So to change the narrative from the not in my backyard to yes in my backyard, I think that could be a quite good breath of fresh air, so to speak, to the discussion, because so often we hear about the not in my backyard, and in Australia I heard that there is this not in my backyard but not there either. So they are like really, they don't want to have affordable housing anywhere. So to change the narrative around that would be quite interesting as well, and I think the public opinion could play a big role, and the individuals could play a big role in that sense as well. And yeah, but at the end of the day, I think everyone wants to live in safe cities, vibrant cities that have nice restaurants, nice parks, and in a city that takes care of its people. So it's good for everyone, and then everyone can have a role in that. And it depends what can you do and what are you capable to do, and every effort is way forward.
So many ways and very practical, and they might seem simple, but changing the NIMBY's attitude, it's really a big deal. However, I would like to keep the positive attitude, because each and every one of us can make a small step in that direction, and we will improve somebody's life, hopefully by that a little bit. But there is one thing I want to ask you. sometimes when I present myself to general audience as an ending homelessness advocate and as the right to housing, I come across with this kind of message. Yeah, if you're so good, then why don't you invite a homeless person from the street to live in your apartment if you are so wise and so brave promoting that? What would be your answer to this?
Well, I think we have an experience of that, not in the field of homelessness, but when there was a refugee crisis in Finland 2015, the former Prime Minister Juha Sipilä, in a TV news, he said that he will invite some of the refugees to live in his home, and of course that never happened. But that gave the wrong signal in a way that this could be a solution, that everyone just opens their doors and that's the solution to this issue. Well, I think that's not the answer, because it's a system failure, and we need to promote the other solutions, not just people opening their doors in a way. Of course, if that's something people want to do, I have nothing against that, but in a bigger picture, we need to find the solutions that will actually change the system and make the housing sector work towards affordable housing as well. And that would be the real answer. And those are the things that we should be focusing, advocating.
Sometimes my answer is that actually that's the situation in Poland, according to my feeling. Actually, people who experience homelessness experience a lot of mental health problems. They are really in a deep crisis of feeling their humanity accepted, of feeling them as valuable, as healthy. And in that way, it actually might be more beneficial and safer for them to be able to be supported by professionals, by people who will be trained to address their needs.
That's a perfect answer.
That's one of the answers. So moving on to other important stakeholders of our societies, especially in the homeless sector, what can we do as leaders, managers of local institutions that work in the field of homelessness, among who are the professionals, right? There are quite a few NGOs. We have welfare centers in Poland. We have housing offices in local governmental offices. And those are all bodies that make themselves, or either make themselves by their missions, like NGOs, or are obliged to by the law to support people who experience homelessness. What we can do from that role to really end homelessness, not manage it, but actually end it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the key things is this kind of real cooperation between the different stakeholders, NGOs and city officials and housing sector and health sector and justice department and people with lived experience, because I feel like that this kind of real cooperation is still lacking in many parts of Europe, and I feel like that's the cornerstone, because like you said, the goal should be ending homelessness. But if you ask these different stakeholders, what does that mean for them? I think you will get different answers. And I think City of Helsinki has done quite good job in a way that they have their own homeless network within the city. So it covers the city officials, of course, but then all the NGOs working in the sector, housing providers, health sector, and justice department. And then the city of Helsinki has this ambitious goal to end homelessness. And they have also write down what does it mean that the city of Helsinki has ended homelessness. And for the city of Helsinki, it means that there at any given time, there shouldn't be more than 100 people experiencing homelessness, and they should be moved in a permanent home within 3 months. So I think that's a clear goal. That's not just this kind of talk that we should be ending homelessness and then some other organization feel the same way, but their goal is something totally different. So I really think the cooperation is the key, to have all the key stakeholders developing the work and sharing the same vision and the goal and write down that goal. And also to monitor how we are doing regarding that shared goal. I think that's one of the things that is still missing. And when we are talking about homeless sector, more or less we are talking about the NGOs working with the housing first, or shelters, or temporary accommodation, or city officials. But sometimes we are lacking the health side or the justice department, and especially the housing sector. And that's one of my my biggest things that I would like to see push forward, is that we talk about more housing. Of course, we are talking about it regarding housing first, but I think that we are focusing more on the support side of the work. And I think we are quite good in the support side of the housing first, but we are lacking the housing, because the truth is that we have been doing housing first on a European level almost 16, 17 years, something like that. And then I feel like we know how to do the support. So I think now we should really focus on the housing side of the things. And then is it affordable housing, scattered housing, housing first units, shared living, different kind of solutions. But I think that's something that is something that we should really put our work in the future, because well, the last question is about the future of the housing first. I won't go there, but I feel like the discussion in the conferences and seminars, it's focusing so much on the support side of the things that we are really missing out the housing sector. And I think in the conferences in the future, we should also include the construction companies, landlords, and these kind of organizations who can really be the housing part of the work we are doing. Because without the housing part, we only have first of what. So
I totally agree, and I feel the lack and need of housing. It's not so clear to me if on the support side we're doing enough. I can feel that still it's much easier for a support worker to use more coercive methods than psychological and emotional support, which is based on person's decision. It's very difficult to accept, to even wait for a person for her decision without imposing our great plans for him or her. And then it's really difficult to provide a background for personal emotional development. So I would say that still, at least from the perspective of Poland, and even from the perspective of the housing first based programs in Poland, I still think we have a lot to do. But I understand that you were speaking from the position of the European advocate, pinpointing the milestones on European level. So
no, but I think you're right as well. I think there is this ongoing need for training and development of the support side of the work as well. Of course, that's something that we do in Finland on a regular basis as well. So we have the Housing First Development Network, which organize different kind of trainings for people. Of course, that's necessary because there are new people entering into the field, coming to work with homeless people. So the training has to be there. But I think we have the core perspective, what support means in housing first. We know that a little bit better than the housing part.
Okay, sometimes in some countries, I guess we can only concentrate on support because housing is not there and people live where they live. We would love to give them housing, but as support workers, NGO leaders, we just can't. In Poland, with really a big effort of few NGOs, we have now 183 people who can live in housing first apartments, but too many street workers, shelter workers, all they have influence on is the way they support, hence the concentration on support.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like we can't do what we know we should, so we do what we can do. And on that matter, I wanted to come back to the beginning of your answer when you mentioned that cooperation was very important. We have a sort of maybe there is a discussion in the air in Poland, but I guess it's not only in Poland. What is the balance between cooperation and clear leadership for a particular goal? Sometimes the goal is very controversial and it's like, let's base our homelessness system on apartments only. So it might mean that we have to rebuild the shelters so that they have apartments rather than, they might end up with having 10 apartments for 10 people, except of spaces for 100, right? So we either, how to keep the balance between setting the goal clear, while the goal might be controversial, which might be discouraging to some partners that we would like to cooperate with, because cooperation usually requires some compromise. So
Yeah, well,
how
I
can
think
we do both? Is it possible to have the cake and eat the cake?
well, I think yes. I think with the cooperation, I think most of the times we hear that it's hard to get the shelters on board, that they are afraid that they will lose their business model or whatever is the case. But then again, I feel like, we can also work with the shelters in a way that they are more active in their work. So the support is more based on the housing first principles inside the shelters as well. So I think that's a beginning. And of course, you are right in that sense that you have to work what you have. So all of a sudden, you will not have 20,000 affordable homes in Poland, for example, or some other countries, if you haven't built them in many years. So you need to work what you got. But I think the leadership needs to come from the government side in a way. So in Finland, it's the Ministry of Environment, which is responsible of homelessness and housing. And then they are leading the way, and then they have the national programs and so on, which we will talk later on. But I think it's important to work what you got and try to make the housing first more like this holistic approach that that you can work with those principles in a shelter or temporary accommodation wherever there is a homeless people, but the people supporting them, they know the basic principles and they can work towards them. And then there's no easy way out. And then I think, like you said, there's a lack of housing everywhere at the moment, lack of affordable housing and so on. But I think we need to be bold with the housing as well, regarding that, is scattered housing the only thing we can do, but can we convert some of the temporary accommodation into permanent homes, for example, or maybe do some kind of pilot project renovating a shelter into permanent homes where there is a support on site 24/7, and try these kind of solutions as well and how they work. And so I think there are many things we can do, and for sure I think you can eat the cake and make the cake at the same time, but you need to be practical and work what you got. But then on the other hand, look to the future as well, how we can drive toward the change of the system as well. Because because if we keep opening new shelters, the change is further away every time.
Okay, so let's move to the kitchen, because either we want to eat the cake or have it, we need the proper kitchen, which should probably or can only be provided by the government, right? By the government. I, like, year and a half ago in Poland, we voted for the new parliament. So we still have a relatively new government. And on Sunday, we have just voted again for the new president, and it's ongoing. Homelessness was not an issue during our presidential elections. However, the need for housing policy was an issue a little bit. It was raised consistently, not only by the left parties, but I think maybe by all candidates, excluding those that are too brown to mention. So I wanted to ask you to tell us what worked in Finland on this political level to end homelessness. And maybe what you're using, because you achieved the success, you will, as the slide shows, you will probably tell us how it went, but we also heard that Finland has a new government that might not yet be as open to right to housing message as the previous government was. It would be interesting to listen to what tools you put to work now to keep consistency in providing housing-based programs to people who experience homelessness.
Yeah, if I start from the beginning, so when we started with the Housing First, 2008 was the first national program where the Housing First was in the core, the Paavo 1, 2008, 2011. And then the quote from Jan Vapaavuori, the former housing minister, he was a housing minister back in the days 2007. And like I said, he is from the National Coalition Party, which leans on the right side of the political spectrum. And then all the political parties and people were really surprised when he took the office and he asked one simple question, that how can it be so hard to house these people? What are we doing wrong? So he appointed this group of 4 whys, it was called back in the days. And these 4 whys, they came back with a report, Name on the Door, which is still framework of the Finnish Housing First model. And what I like about this example is that sometimes it can only take one political champion who carries the torch and who's bold enough to use his power or her power to do the change and drive the change. And that's exactly what Mr. Vapaavuori did. He used his power to drive the change, and then because he leans on the right side of the political spectrum, it was quite easy for him to get all the other political parties behind the plan that housing first should become the thing in Finland, and we should strive for a systemic change. So sometimes it only takes this one really powerful political champion. So you don't need to win the whole government on your side. You just need to win the one right person. And then I think that gives many people hope that, you know, it is possible to have that one political champion who is bold enough to do the change. So like I said, the Name on the Door report, it's still the framework of the Finnish Housing First, and since 2008 we have been doing these national homelessness programs where the Housing First is in the core of everything. So when we started 2008, the goal was to end long-term homelessness. And long-term homelessness in Finland means that someone has been homeless over a year or many times during a 3-year period. So that was the goal for 2008, 2015 actually, so the both Paavo programs. And the systemic change started that we started to renovate the shelters and temporary accommodations into Housing First units, where people have permanent home, normal rental agreement, but then again there is support on site 24/7. And that was crucial in a way that because we used a lot of money as well to do the renovations. And as you can remember, 2008, it was the beginning of a global banking crisis. So there was no extra money, so to speak, anywhere. But still in Finland, the government found the money to do the renovations and found people place to stay, permanent homes. And it was important because on a relatively quick period of time, we were able to make the change visible. All of a sudden, there were no more people on the streets because they were housed with the support. So it was also clear to the public that it was wise use of money to do this systemic change into Housing First from the staircase model, because now people can see that there are no more homeless people on the streets, the cities and the streets are safer, so it was visible for the public as well. And I think that was really important, because now we can say that, you know, we won the public over, and they were on our side regarding that, you know, housing should be a basic right and housing is a human right, and this is how it should have always been. So that was one of the most important things, and the political will has been there since 2008, and it is still there. In my opinion, there are some shatterings for sure, and then the not so new government, they have been in power for 2 years. They have made some changes to the social benefit system, so people will get less money. And then they have cut the funding from the NGOs working in the field of homelessness. They have cut funding from the prevention work. So many different kind of things they have done. And then, of course, now we can see the consequences that the number of homeless people is rising a little bit in Finland as well. And unfortunately, my personal prediction is that they will keep rising this year as well, for sure. And then, but what we are doing now as a sector, the current government, they have a national program to end long-term homelessness, which is there's only one word change, but it's a big change because the previous government had a goal to end all homelessness by the end of 27, and now this government has a plan to end long-term homelessness by the end of 27. And the reality is that they have a program, they have funding for the program, 9 biggest cities are included. They have just now started their projects. They have some project money to do different kind of things. And then I think they actually might be able to lower the number of long-term homeless people. But at the same time, there are more people flowing into the homelessness. So that's why the numbers will go up. So that's the downside of the work that the government is doing. And it's a little bit tricky because the current prime minister party, it's the same National Coalition Party, which is like the founder party of the Finnish Housing First model. So the same party that started the whole systemic change is now challenging it more or less. So of course people have changed, new leaderships and new everything. So that's something as well. And then what we are trying to do is, of course, we try to advocate as much as we can. We try to use the international recognition as one of the spearheads, and then try to make them understand that even though they are now making some savings into the government budget, in the long term, if there will be more homeless people, the cost will be significantly higher on an individual level and also on a financial level. And the other thing we are trying to push really hard is that in the government program, the overall program, they emphasize work very, very much, even though at the moment there are more unemployed people in Finland since 2007, but still work is really important part of the government program. And of course, we try to advocate that wouldn't it be better if people actually have a home of their own where they could actually seek those job opportunities? Because if you are in shelter, streets, or temporary accommodation, it's quite hard or impossible to seek for a job or education or any of these kind of things. So we try to have different views and different perspectives how we advocate the work now. But I think what is important is that even though we are pushing this work-related advocacy and financial perspective, that the core message will always be there as well, that housing is a human right. I think that's something that we cannot forget, even though we are focusing on different things doing the communication and advocacy work. But always we should include that housing is a human right, because if we as a sector don't do it, no one will do it, to be honest. So that's why I think it's important that we keep that message there as well. And then we'll see what happens. I think we have a good relationship with the government, and we have regular conversations with them, and the minister who's responsible for homelessness, we invite her all the events that we are holding, and then usually she gives us speeches and these kind of things, and try to have this good communication level and hope that something will change in the future. And of course, that's something that we are striving for, but we'll see. There is 2 years left, and 27 there will be the next government elections, and we'll see what the result will be then. But at the moment it looks like the numbers will keep going up this year as well. And well, we don't know about 26, but if things continue to go as they are going at the moment, there are some challenges and road bumps ahead for sure.
So do you feel that you have to do the work convincing the government to the right solution, which was already a success in Finland? Do you feel you have to do this convincing all over again?
In a way, yes. From a different perspective, but in a way, yes. I think as you can see, we started with the first Paavo program. It was about ending long-term homelessness, and now the current program is once again ending long-term homelessness. So we have done the full circle, so to speak. And then, now we need to do the work all over again. And then, of course, there is this True Finns party, which is leaning more on the right side of the political spectrum, and they rely heavily on the safety of the cities, and they would like to have more police officers and more surveillance and all these kind of things. And of course, we try to counter that actually the best way of doing the safety work is guarantee that everyone has home of their own, and that creates the real safety for the individuals, but also for the cities and so on. So yeah, we are doing the same work all over again, but I think, like I said, we are living in a different era at the moment. I think people are more selfish. A lot of things have happened since we started. Trump is once again in power, and some of the politicians are taking influence from his speeches and how he sees the world and these kind of things. So it's a hard work. I think it's getting harder. But then again, we will not stop until we have a home for each and everyone here in Finland. But yeah, it's a full circle, and now we are doing once again the advocacy work that we already did in 2008 and 2009. But like I said, when it comes to support side, we need the training to be constant, and when it comes to advocacy work, we need to advocate the work constantly and make sure that each and every politician and local decision maker knows why it's beneficial for all people that we take care of the homelessness issue and try to make sure that each and everyone have a safe place to call home.
Well, yes, and I guess it's inevitable since homelessness has structural causes. It's not an individual decision by a single person. The causes are structural, as we learned in the years. It's about the education system, about the housing system, about the employment options, about the transport exclusion, which we talk a lot about in Poland. So the causes are systemic, and as long as our societies function as they function right now, there will always be homelessness, new homelessness, and the deal is that it lasts the shortest possible period. So there will be work for us forever, unfortunately. But before we go to the last question, which you like about the future of housing first, I wanted to ask you if we had a leader in Polish government. Currently in Polish government, there are people who know about homelessness a lot and who are devoted to creating more equal societies. If we had a leader or two, what could this person do as a first step? I understand that in Finland, the first step was devoting some funding, and then there was a quick result. People quickly noticed that there was less street homelessness. And then there was cooperation, national programs, strong advocacy and cooperation with professional NGOs like Y Foundation. But what would be the first step for a devoted leader in our government to start the real change toward ending homelessness?
Well, I think the first thing that the Minister Vapaavuori did was actually that he appointed these 4 whys to do a report. What should we do next? And then became the report Name on the Door.
We have lots of reports, and we have various strategies for deinstitutionalization, for social inclusion. I'm not sure we have a housing strategy, but we have various programs, and somehow this is not the tool. So what would be your next choice?
Well, when the next choice is to strengthen these political champions to use their power to do the actual work, because like you said, if you have the strategies, and this is one of the things I have been saying many times, but I feel like, we have the discussions and we have the strategy papers, but at the end of the day, the words doesn't matter at all if we don't have the action to back those words up. So we need the action part, so that at some point we would have a situation where housing would not be a privilege for the few, but a human right for all. So the action part, I think that's the crucial thing, that they start doing something instead of just, being there and writing the reports and saying the nice things, which is a good thing as well if the politicians are saying the nice things, but turn those nice things into action is what matters. And then of course, I think building some kind of coalition between the different stakeholders, so it's not so it covers, like I said at the beginning, that the cooperation is the key, to have this kind of task force from different part of the government, so that everyone is included in the work and then start doing.
Okay,
It's not a rocket science in a way, but it takes boldness. So you have to have brave politicians who are not afraid to use their power and not afraid to put their, well, how can I say it nicely, head on the line, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there is it is a good advice that we can all use, not only in Poland, but in other countries as well. And now moving to the last question, not the least important at all. It's about the future of Housing First. That's the question I have to ask, because I am the president of the Housing First Poland Foundation. And to me personally, as well as professionally, the Housing First is the most universal and humane idea of supporting people in crisis, because it simply provides people with necessary and yet basic tools, which is a place they can call home, and right support, which enables them to stop actually fighting for survival and start fighting for the future. And Housing First as a program is one solution, but as we observe, a program with full fidelity, as we say among Housing First experts, is not usually, it's not very easy achievable. So maybe there is a middle way. For us, the middle way would be Housing First values. I somehow know that we agree on that, but I wanted to hear more about your perspective on the future of Housing First. And this would be our last question. So if the audience has any questions, now it is the time to write them down and ask them in 5 to 10 minutes.
This is a really good question, and I have been thinking about this a lot, not just by myself, but with different people all over the world. And I remember when I joined Y Foundation in 2018, I took part one of the Housing First Europe Hub meetings in Helsinki, and then many of the speakers in 2018 were saying that now we have the momentum for the Housing First, and we should really drive for the change, that the momentum is here, and all the countries were more or less hyped about the Housing First as this kind of silver bullet to end homelessness or decrease the number of homeless people. And here we are, 2025, and the situation is that we have more homeless people than ever. And then what I have seen is that there has been this kind of anti-Housing First movement rising as well, especially in the US soil with the Trump government. And then it's a bit tricky there as well, because it was the George Bush government, so the Republicans who started the Housing First there as well. And now with the Trump being the president, they are like all anti-Housing First, and then the funding for the Housing First projects and NGOs is like nowhere at the moment in the US. And at the same time, there is hope on a EU level. I feel like FEANZA has been doing great work pushing towards the EU, and then in 21 we got the Lisbon Declaration, and now we have the EPOC, European Platform on Combating Homelessness, where the Housing First is in the core of that platform, and there is all the 27 member states are involved in that work. And then there is also affordable housing plan coming from the EU by the end of this year. And then there is also anti-poverty strategy. And homelessness is one of the things in that strategy as well in the future. And then I believe there will be some housing first as well. So it's a tricky question because I remember in that same meeting 2018, Mr. Juha Kahila, the former CEO of the Wire Foundation, he said that we have some years left to really do the system change for housing first, and then other issues will rise and the housing first will be put on side or on hold. And he was mentioning the climate change. All of a sudden, we will have millions of new people coming to Europe. What will we do then? And then now we have seen these, horrible things happening in Ukraine, Gaza, and so on. So there are many things that are challenging the core of the housing first at the moment. And what I'm, yeah, one example from European side as well, because I think it's important to recognize that Germany is a big country and they were really hyped about the housing first 5 years ago. And now the current politicians in Germany, they are as well thinking about that is the housing first right way to do the work. And then earlier this year, we get the homelessness numbers from Germany, and the number was something like 500,000 people without a home. So it was horrible figure. And then so that's why the politicians back there, they are also considering that should we back down from the housing first and try to find some other solutions, which are usually shelters and temporary accommodation. So countries are leaning back to those old ways of doing the work. So I feel like we need to have more success stories than Finland when it comes to housing first. And then, of course, now it's an unfortunate situation that we are taking some steps back in Finland as well. But I'm quite hopeful that there will be some new countries in the future that will lead the way in and show that when doing housing first properly, offering people the homes they can afford, different housing solutions, not only scattered housing. I think that's something that we really need to understand in the housing first, that scattered housing is not the only solution in housing first, that we can have units, we can have shared living and different kind of housing solutions that we don't even know about yet, but they should all based on permanent rental agreement. I think that's one of the core values. But from the countries that I think will lead the way in the future, I think Denmark is quite promising. They have an excellent national program around homelessness, and housing first is in the core of that program. They have a really good way how they have integrated the shelter system into the work as well. And then I will not go deep into details regarding that, but they are doing cooperation with the shelter sector, the housing companies, the NGOs, service providers, and people with lived experience. And they have found new ways to actually house people with the right kind of support. So I think Denmark will do good things in the future, but I think we need more these countries with that will have good results, because if in Finland we are going backwards and the number of homeless people will rise, we lose that one thing that most of the politicians and decision makers and leaders of the NGOs could have said in their own countries, that look how Finland has done it, so we can do it as well. But now I already have heard that some of the politicians have said, but look, Finland now, it doesn't work on a long run. So that's something that we really have to focus on, that we get the new countries on board that will actually lead the way toward housing first as well. But then with the housing first, I think I'm repeating myself, sounding like a broken record player, but the focus on housing has to be there, because I feel like I said, we are talking about the support side of the things, which is a good thing, but we need to have more conferences and more opportunities to have joint conversations with the construction companies, landlords, housing companies, housing association, and so on. So I think from there we can find some good cooperation models that will lead into new kind of results as well. And I think that's really something that we should be focusing on in the future. for sure on a local level, national level, but on a EU level as well. And I think in the coming years, there will be some good funding opportunities rising from the EU side. And then I think those funding opportunities will be a good way to do cooperation between different countries as well. So joining the forces, pushing the change will be the future. But I think we need to fight much harder for housing first than we had previously, because the influence from the US is such a heavy influence, and the anti-housing first forces are really joining the efforts, and they are making a lot of damage at the moment, especially in the US,
Right.
but it will be only a matter of time because before those anti-housing first forces will come to Europe as well, and then we really need to be ready for a fight.
Well, luckily, not always the US was the example for Europe, so maybe it won't be this time as well. And I think that Finland would have to take so many steps back to be not a success and to have the levels of homelessness comparable to American or European, then that for many years it won't be an issue. Like, we observe the growth of the number of people experiencing homelessness in Finland, but the thing is that, you know, immediately that it happened and that the growth is really in very small numbers. So I guess there is no doubt it's a success in all ways. There are things to continue that should be continued, but the message that Finland is not a success is not appealing to me at all. Just one a question before the questions from the audience, and this is the question I think important from the Central European perspective. You mentioned that scattered housing first, is not the only option, and you mentioned supported housing in common buildings. I was wondering if you could say just in a few words what kind of a service it is. I'm asking because across our region, the notion of deinstitutionalization is very popular. There is a lot of funding, at least in Poland, for that, which means that actually people should be able to stay in their local communities in single apartments, or maybe 3, 4, 7 people in one, let's say, institution, rather than be residing in big institutions. So I understand that supported housing is sort of a big institution where, for example, 60 people with the same needs live in one building.
Yeah, in Finland, when we did the system change, like I said, we renovate most of the shelters into these permanent homes for people. So there can be, let's say, 50 apartments in one building, and then people have their own home. It's a normal home, you know, studio apartments or 2-bedroom homes. And then they sign rental agreement for unlimited time. It's affordable housing, but then again, there is a support on site 24/7 if and when needed. And then for me, it has been a question as well, or for me, it has been hard to understand, because I know there are many organizations around Europe and around the world who doesn't see our housing first units as part of the housing first model at all. It only should be scattered housing. But what have always intrigues me is that, you know, why is it okay that, you know, young people, they live together in the same buildings, elderly people, they live together in the same buildings, but when it comes to homeless people, all of a sudden it's like the worst thing that can happen to them is to have a neighbor who have the similar experience as you. And then the other thing is that no one is forced to live in these housing first units. It's a choice. So people can choose scattered housing or housing first unit, for example. And the reality is at the moment in Finland, for example, that most of the people, they choose to live in these housing first community-based units because the fear of loneliness and isolation. They want to have these communal spaces where they can watch TV together with the other tenants or hang out with other tenants. And then we have also included low threshold work activities into these units, meaning that there are work coaches working inside the units, offering people different kind of work opportunities each and every day. And it's a really flexible way to do the work. So people can choose if they want to work 1 hour a month, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a day, 5 hours a day, 5 times a week. And then it has create a really good pathway into the work life as well for many people. And then it has created this kind of situation where some of the tenants have told me, for example, that it has been a great way to do the harm reduction work, because in the morning when they wake up, they have a choice. They have a choice, they can open the fridge and take a bottle of beer and start drinking, or they can go literally downstairs and start working with something and get money while doing it, of course. And then the work is really variety of different kind of things. For example, the tenants, they clean the community areas by themselves. They do a bit of the maintenance work. They fix bikes. There is the woodwork, heavy metal shop. They do T-shirts. But then there is also a connection with private companies. So for example, IKEA and the National Post Office in Finland, they are ordering different kind of work from the units and sometimes offering training opportunities and these kind of things for people as well. So I really myself personally, I don't see the housing first units as institutions at all. I see them as normal apartment buildings where there is support on site, and most of the people, they need the support every day. Some people need it less, some people need it more, but it's there. And then again, who doesn't need some kind of support every now and then? And it's people's home. They do the rules together with the employees. Whenever the units are recruiting a new worker, for example, there is always at least one tenant who takes part in the job interviews and these kind of things. So I think it's giving people a choice as well.
Okay, so it's as long as people have their private space, which is an apartment, it's not a room with common bathroom.
Yeah.
It's their private space and it's guaranteed by the contract. It's okay, regardless of how many of them is in one building, especially that the support is on site.
Yeah, because that's something that when we talk about housing first, we always talk about the tailor-made support, but then the housing should be this one kind of housing always. But I think when it comes to housing, it has to be tailor-made as well, because one kind of housing does not fit for all. So we need to have different housing solutions for different needs as well.
So the message is, as you put it on your last slide, I can't read it in Finnish. I'm not sure if my English translation will be right. So it's for everyone to have a home, right?
Home for all. Home
for all. And it's a powerful question to me. Sometimes I read a street workers posts on Facebook, and it's not home for everyone, it's life for everyone, because actually without homes for all, we are fighting for people to be able to stay alive. So I love the change in the perspective, and I hope we can all, in networks and in cooperation with brave goals, that we can do this. I will ask about other models that are seen to be beneficial for ending homelessness, like in Ireland. Also in our SOLACE-CEE partnership, we are piloting the models that are more concentrated on integrating health and social services, assuming that housing is available anyway. So what would be the role of integrated support through which we can provide the customer with both social, psychological support and medical support?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in our model, the support is mainly social support, but then there are these health elements as well, regarding that if there is a heavy mental health challenges and people need help with their mental health, there is this mobile team, for example, in Helsinki, which can then go inside the housing first units and offer the mental health help straight to people's homes. But I think the integration of social services and health should be like written down in the housing first, because I think it's already there. But I think that most of the time we are missing the health part, and I think it's a good thing that we are having these kind of projects and programs, and we try to do the integration of both, because I think it's necessary. And then the other thing I think what we need to do regarding is to focus on the prevention, which I didn't talk about much. But on a big picture, of course, the affordable housing, it's the best structural element against homelessness, so people can actually afford their housing. So that's one thing, but then also to develop different kind of services. So if some tenants are struggling to pay the rent, for example, or have any other kind of housing issues, that they should have access to services immediately. So at the end of the day, they wouldn't be evicted, and we could prevent those situations and have less people flowing into homelessness in the first place. So I think having the prevention and housing first together, it would be like the key for the future as well.
I guess there is a question from Flora.
Yes, thank you. I have actually two questions. I would like to ask you, on the first slide, you have the graph that you had 18,000 homelesses 40 years ago, and now you have just 4,000. I would like to ask you that how many people in numbers or in percentages are able to get back to live his own life, or you have still 12,000 persons within your Housing First project, so they are living with you 40 years. This is my first question. And the second question is that you mentioned that you have a housing minister. I would like to ask you, is it an official name or just a nickname? And if it is some official division or something like that, how many people are working there? Project managers, psychologists, doctors, social workers, communication experts, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, for the first question, it's a good question, and well, we started the Housing First only 2008, so I'm not too sure about the numbers before that, that how many people are still in the support side of the things. Not too many, I would guess. And but the Housing First, it's a bit hard to say, because for us it's not a project or a program. It's this kind of holistic approach, and then the whole idea has always been that people can live in those. Even if it's scattered housing or Housing First unit, they can live there as long as they wish. So it's their own rental agreement. They have the same rights and responsibilities as anyone else. And so more or less, we don't have this graduation, what in many countries they have, that someone graduates from Housing First to go somewhere else, but we don't have that in a similar way. So in scattered housing, the thing that happens is that when someone doesn't need any kind of support anymore, then the support ends and people can remain their lives in their home, and that's more or less it. And in the Housing First units, the reality is that there are some people who have been living in the unit since 2008 when we converted them, and they are still living there, and they will live there for the rest of their lives because the support needs are so heavy, and that's totally fine as well. And but the outflow from the Housing First unit, I hate the word outflow, but that's the phrase we are using. Outflow from the Housing First units is I think there are something like, depending on a unit, but maybe 3 person moving out from a unit into scattered housing if they want, on a yearly basis, and then the support is delivered into their homes. And what we have done now is that when someone is leaving out from Housing First unit into scattered housing, for example, and they have lighter support needs, the same people who work in the Housing First unit, they will deliver the support as well, so that there is no personal changes within that process. So the trust and all the relationships stays the same, and only the place people are living changes. And then the other question, unfortunately, we don't have housing minister anymore. Back in the 2007 and 8, we still have the title housing minister inside the government, but now is a minister who's responsible of, it was monster word. She's responsible of environment, housing, homelessness, and some other thing, energy or something like that. But inside her cabinet, there is no social workers or NGOs or anything like that. So she's a minister and she sees the big picture. And then there is the Ministry of Environment, which is more or less full of specialists around the housing and homelessness, and then they lead the national programs at the moment, and have been leading since 2008. But the work that is put into the table is done by the NGOs and the cities when it comes to social workers and nurses and practical nurses and so on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? There is a question from Veronica.
Hello, I'm Veronica from Dipol, Slovakia. I'm working in Housing First. Could you please just put the volume down? I'm so sorry, my colleague's microphone was on. So loud. So I wanted to ask, in Finland, what is the housing benefit for people who are living in Housing First projects? Because in Slovakia is very low, the housing benefit. So that's why we have to actually get the money from European Union, because the people otherwise, if we don't have the European Social Fund, our clients, our service users wouldn't be able actually to live in independent accommodation because of the housing benefit is so low. So how is it in Finland, the benefits in terms of housing?
Yeah, so when it comes to housing, well, of course, Finland has a quite good welfare system.
Okay.
And so people who are homeless and living in Housing First, for example, so formerly homeless people, if they don't have any income at all, they can get the housing benefit, which can cover up to 70% of the rent. And then beside that, some of the people, they already have some kind of pension, but if they don't have pension, then they can get the unemployment benefit and then the living allowance. So the idea is that everyone should have somewhere around 500 euros to spend within a month after they have paid the rent already. So in that sense, of course, there's a difference between Slovakia and Finland and the Nordic countries, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much.
My understanding is that about now in Slovakia, or maybe not in Slovakia, maybe in Czech Republic, there is this big reform planned to diminish, to smallen the benefits. I was made aware of that by an organization from the Czech Republic, I guess, and it causes a lot of worries among Housing First providers that the customers will have less income to be able to sustain the apartments. So it's a big issue.
Yeah, and I think it's a trend. Like I said, it has happened in Finland as well. So the government has slashed some of the social benefits as well. So people have less money for the rent. And so that's why we need to keep building affordable homes as well and all these kind of things. So I think that's a trend happening all around the world at the moment, that the social benefits are decreasing. And at the same time, the housing prices are going up. So there is no balance in between those two.
Well, yeah, that's why it's really useful to share how it is in our countries, because actually in Poland, the housing benefits has always been extremely low. But on the other hand, otherwise than in the Czech Republic and in Slovakia, Poland kept not big enough, but bigger social housing resources. About 10% of housing belongs to municipalities, to gminas in Poland. So the customers who actually have some welfare benefit and have the right to municipal housing, they really pay a very small rent. So regardless of the small amount of the benefits they can receive, once we use for Housing First programs social housing, it's actually doable. It's not easy. It's living on the verge of, minimum level of existency, but it's doable. So I guess it varies. Okay, are there any questions? If there is you want to answer, Juha, or not?
Yeah, maybe I will just add that, I understand the lack of housing, and of course, from a Finnish perspective, I'm really happy that we've had wise politicians, because we have been building state-subsidized affordable housing for the past 76 years, and we have never stopped doing it. And of course, that gives us a benefit in a sense that we have a quite sizable affordable housing stock. So 13% of all the housing in Finland is affordable housing, and some of that stock is targeted towards the homeless people. So of course, there's a difference if you have been building 76 years of affordable housing, or you are starting just now, or you have stopped building somewhere in the 90s.
Yeah, there are sometimes in our differences, there are, positive differences and there are negative. I just wanted to mention that actually I know there is a debate in Housing First circles whether to use or not social housing. So that's the experience of Housing First Poland Foundation, that actually in our ambivalence program we simply don't have money for private apartments. So we only work with people who already got into social housing. We help them get there. So we're not providing the apartment first, but once people have it, and then we provide the support, which is not very much as Housing First should be, but still we can do a lot with Housing First values, and we find it positive that there is this option for the customers to use this kind of apartments, and for our organization to provide Housing First program using that. Okay. Juha, I wanted to thank you so much for doing this webinar. Your support and knowledge has always been very important to me, and I guess to Housing First Poland Foundation. I'm glad we are 5 years old. We were in one project when the foundation started. So many thanks for not only for this webinar, but also for your ongoing support for the foundation and for the mission, which is, I guess, common, so that everyone has a home for his own. So thanks a lot.
My pleasure, and for the next 5 years that are coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Housing First in Practice webinar series. We hope the insights shared today help inspire new approaches and deepen your understanding of Housing First principles. This webinar was co-founded by the regional government of the Mazovia Voivodeship through the project titled Housing First Values New Solutions for Ending Homelessness. See you next time.